Well, welcome to the Science of Longevity. I'm Victoria Woodhall, and of all the talks here, I'm so thrilled to be involved in this one because longevity really is a passion of mine. And as such, I am the first to get suckered into the latest pill or gadget promising to extend my life. But fortunately, I have three eminent guests here to save us all from unwarranted purchases and marketing hype. Because as anyone who's maybe seen the Brian Johnson documentary on Netflix, you know, in the world of longevity, nothing is as it seems. And we're now living in the age of the longevity influencer. Who knew? Crazy, right? And I was reading recently that even the idea of the blue zones, the places in the world where people live the longest, that's been debunked by a study. Apparently it's all a pension scam. What to believe? But Sarah Karolides, luckily, is going to tell us what that's all about. So, what is biohacking? What is bulletproof living? And what's the difference between your lifespan and your health span? And do we actually want to live to 120? Let's sort out the myth from the fact with our panelists, Sarah Karolides, Dr. Pamela Benito at the end, and in the middle, Dr. Tamzin Lewis. So I'm going to ask you all just briefly to introduce yourselves and to tell us what is the longevity question that you are asked the most. So Sarah Karolides, she's functional nutrition lead at Lanzarote at the Arts Club and head of nutrition at Azuki. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Victoria. I think you just have introduced me. I'm Sarah.
A bit more.
I have been a nutritionist for 25 years, and I would say the longevity question that people are asking is actually, how can I avoid what happened to my parents?
Interesting. Yeah, well, hopefully we'll be answering that question when we come to a deep dive with you a bit later. Dr. Tamzin, you're a member of the Royal College of Psychiatrists with a Masters in Neuroscience and the Biology of Aging, a former UK Ironman champion, and the founder of Integrative Medicine Service Wellgevity, founding team of Six Senses Ibiza. The list goes on. Tell us a little bit about what you do and the longevity question you're asked the most.
Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here. I don't sleep. That's why my CV is that long.
So you have a very long day, a long life.
Yeah, no, it's okay. What were you, the question, yes. Most people come to me and say, what exactly is longevity medicine? Is it about cryopreservation? Is it about NAD? Those are the two things that come to me most.
Yes, NAD. That's
NAD.
Yes,
We'll
everyone
talk
wants
a lot
to know about
NAD.
that. Don't
But the one thing I often say is longevity is a side effect of good medicine, of medicine done well, proactively, preventatively.
Brilliant. Well, look forward to hearing more about that. And at the end, Dr. Pamela Benito, you're known for your invisible facial artistry with injectables and threads, your use of IVs, and pioneering use of ozone therapy. Tell us a little bit more about what you do and the question in the longevity space you're asked the most often.
Thank you, Victoria, and I'm delighted to be here today. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Dr. Pamela, or Pam. I'm based in Knightsbridge, and I'm a cosmetic practitioner, dental surgeon by background, and I've been doing aesthetics for 12 years now in combination with the IV therapy, as Victoria mentioned, and longevity. And I think the question that I get asked the most, as Tam was saying, one is, what is longevity? Because I think a lot of patients are still not very familiar with it, but also how do I stay younger? So again, NAD has become one of the most ingredients that people ask for at the moment. So it's become like a trend.
Thank you. Sarah, I have left your questions in the green room, but we honestly, you couldn't shut us up when we were talking about our what you wanted to discuss here today. But you've been a nutritional therapist for 25 years. How has the space changed?
The space has changed enormously, and a lot of that is due to people being far more educated now, which I love. They come in with, I know about the gut, I know a bit about the microbiome, what's going on, should I be taking NAD? They come in with specific questions, and they are also far keener to do things preventatively themselves. I think COVID was a massive wake-up call. A lot of people since then have been thinking, well, we've got a few things. We've got COVID, we've got the decline of the NHS, and we've also got women extending their careers longer and wanting to feel on top of things, wanting to feel well. So there's a few things that have happened. So they're coming in with specific, they know, okay, do I need to know my genetics? What's going to affect the genetics on top of that? What about epigenetics? They're far more educated than they were. And we are far more educated as well. 20 years ago, there was hardly a paper on the gut, maybe a few a year. Now there's about 4 papers on the gut every day. Yeah. So I think education is the main thing I would say that's the difference.
Yeah, and there are, as you said, there are lots of ways that we can intervene early in our health now. I mean, the world of health testing, the things that you can send off your blood, your poo in the post. There's all our samples filling the postal services as we speak. But what is actually useful?
What you can do with this testing, and this has been absolutely wonderful, the advance of medical diagnostic testing is phenomenal. You can really pinpoint where are your susceptibilities, where are your weaknesses, what's going on right now. We've got quite a few people at the moment who maybe have been on Mounjaro or Ozempic for 6 months. They haven't eaten. They are on the floor with nutrient deficiencies, and their muscle content is now low, things like that. We can tailor things far more specifically to individuals through certain targeted testing to really find out. If you've just had twins and you've been breastfeeding, I was speaking to somebody earlier, you're probably quite low in several nutrients. You're running a job at the same time, you're running around. It's really useful at different times of life to get an MOT, see exactly what's going on, and then we can tailor the interventions, whether they're medical, pharmaceutical, or supplements, things like that. The advance of the testing, and I think the advance of the therapeutics as well, has been tremendous, and we can personalize that now.
That's so useful, isn't it? But would you advise any health tests that you can buy over the counter or online? Are they worth our money and our time?
Vitamin D, I would say, is worth your time. Everyone in the country right now is low in vitamin D. Please tell me you're all taking it, because we haven't seen the sun since, 2023 or something. I mean, just crazy. And the darker your skin, the less vitamin D you actually manufacture. So vitamin D, and then I think you can get a bit from the doctor, getting an iron test, general sort of blood test if you're fatigued or something. But the over-the-counter ones, I don't know what anyone else thinks. Apart from that, I would rather go and get something from a specialist, really.
And it's also knowing what to do with that information. If you come back with a low, this, that, or the other, a high, whatever, how do you interpret that? Are you going to start self-medicating based on having done a home test? Yeah. We were also talking about gene tests, and I did one about sort of 7 or 8 years ago, and I found out I had the MTHFR gene and the this, that, and the other gene. But you said that kind of was waning, really, the usefulness of that.
It is waning. It's not something I would do straight away unless somebody knows there's something in their family that there really could be a susceptibility to. It's a useful part of your overall health picture. I mean, I know, same as you, I did my genetics 10, 15 years ago when it was all sort of first coming out, and I know there's osteoporosis in my family, and guess what? I've got that susceptibility, so it's something I've got to really guard against and think about everything I can do to ward that off. So it's great to know that there are these SNPs in your genes that will leave you susceptible to things as you get older. But otherwise, I think genetics, in terms of longevity and aging, it's only really responsible for about 20% maximum of the picture of why you age.
So it's
epigenetics, which is lifestyle and everything you do, is the 80% that really, really matters.
And the great news is that if it's epigenetic, you can intervene. You can do things about it.
It's good news. There's something you can do about it.
Yeah, amazing. Could we also talk about the idea of aging being contagious?
Yes.
Sarah said this to me, and I thought, what is that about? But save it. Tell me when we're on the panel.
Yeah, aging is contagious, and it's a mixture of physical and also social. So there was some rather nasty tests that came out a couple of years ago on mice, where they conjoined some old and young mice. So the blood from the old mice was going to the young and vice versa. They've done it on blood tests, and they've done it on stool tests as well, the microbiome. And in both cases, the young mice aged and the older mice became younger. So this is something that will happen. And we've seen, you mentioned Brian Johnson. Yeah. He had his son's stem cells, and he put his stem cells into his father, didn't he? I think we're going to see more of this. So, so aging, microbiome transfers and blood transfers, plasma transfers in mice have shown that you can either make yourself younger or older.
Wow.
But I also think it's contagious socially. If you hang out with a bunch of people who don't exercise, sit around eating rubbish, have a kind of older view of the world, it ages you. If you hang out with young people and keep curious and keep going out and exercising and getting sunshine and everything, you stay younger. And there are a lot of studies on that.
Brilliant. We mentioned earlier the blue zones.
Yes.
Tell us about that bit of research. Blue zones, are they still something to aspire to or to look at?
Well, it's interesting. So they did a lot of work on these blue zones, and it was a big, big thing about how certain areas around the world, Ikaria in Greece, Sicily, I think was another one, one in Japan,
and
yes.
North
Okinawa,
America. Yeah.
Exactly. So they seemed to have a greater percentage of centenarians or older who were healthy. So immediately they start looking at what they're doing there, and there's a lot of community. It is a lot of fresh, healthy, local foods, not much meat, vegetables, so on, and there's usually a fermented food in the balance. But then, a couple of years ago, a researcher at UCL went back in and looked at the data and realized that actually a lot of these people did not have birth date data. So they were saying, yes, Rosa Maria is 104. No, she's not.
She just feels like she's been around a long time, so she picked a number out of the air.
And there were people in there who weren't actually alive. They'd been collecting their pensions.
Yeah, so their
saying they were
relatives have been
still
collecting the
alive.
pensions of...
So unfortunate. However, having said that, okay, so maybe the sampling wasn't perhaps as rigorous as it might have been, but I think the central tenets, is sort of the living healthily, the living local, sustainable, organic stuff, the community, the getting together on a Friday night, having a glass of wine after work and having a game of cards and a giggle, whatever. I think a lot of that is still completely relevant. So the blue zones have turned a bit grey.
Yes.
But I think the idea is
Still better than a city,
there is still some merit there.
smog zone. And we all want the magic pill, don't we? I bet people say, oh, what can I take for living longer or whatever. Are there any supplements that you think really do move the needle for longevity?
I still think you've got to look after the basics first. If you are low in magnesium, if you are low in vitamin D, some of the antioxidants, I mean, NAD, fantastic. It's a precursor to glutathione. If you're low in it, yes, it is going to affect your aging, but maybe get it measured. It's not that expensive. See what's going on. Collagen is a big one. I mean, it's been totally taken by the beauty industry, but my goodness, collagen is the most abundant protein in the body. It comes from the Greek. Kolla means glue, and gen means to make glue. We use it in bones, tendons, ligaments, everywhere. So I think getting your collagen sorted is a really good one. Antioxidants, I mentioned glutathione, magnesium. I mean, there are so many, and I'd love people to be able to get them from food, but the quality of our food now is so bad compared to what it was 50, 80 years ago that we almost always have to send
and
people
don't we rip
towards
through our
supplements.
supplies of magnesium because we're all stressed? You know,
Completely.
we need more than we can kind of possibly eat.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned also the question you're asked the most is how can I avoid turning into my parents?
I think certainly my generation, we have watched our parents work extremely hard and stay alive for longer. I think their parents probably passed away that little bit sooner, and they're getting, you know, the four main drivers: cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, metabolic diseases. What's the fourth one?
Diabetes? Have we done that?
Yes, that's the metabolic.
Cardiovascular
Anyway,
disease?
yeah, cardiovascular. Thank you. And they're coming along saying, we know there are ways to avoid these now.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily written into your future that you have to have one of these diseases. What can I do? How can I make sure now that I'm optimizing my health? Yes, I want to be healthy. I want to live really well, work longer, look after my kids and grandkids. But how can I avoid that awful decline at old age? I think that, for me, is the biggest driver.
Thank you. And I think we know that there are so many more interventions now that we can bring in. So thank you. And I think it's neatly a way to segue into you, Dr. Tam, because you know, tell us a little bit about what goes on in your clinic, because there's so many things that you look after there in the longevity space.
Sure. So I run a clinic called Wellgevity, and I coined that term some 8 years ago now because I was wondering what longevity was all about. And you started this discussion talking about lifespan and health span, which is the number of years that one spends in good health and free from disease. And What we do at Longevity is essentially we run deep data panels on people. I mean, obviously, the more data we get, we used to know not what to do with a lot of this data, but with the advent of AI, we're able to cross-populate between your gut test, your microbiome test, same thing, but with gut health markers, your genetic tests, your predispositions, and then, as you alluded to with this MTHFR, the mother gene, we can get a functional readout now. So you're not just your genes, you're the functional readout of them. So we can look at the activity of certain genes. So I like to get a dashboard on people and use that as a sort of a visual representation on the areas in their life they need to work. But, my background is in neuroscience and psychiatry, so I spend a lot of time talking to people about their emotional health, their drivers of their different behaviors, and how that leads us often into patterns of self-destruction, but also, how we could do better in certain areas of our life, which can then sort of, in aggregate, add up to creating a health span.
So health span being the number of years that you live in a healthy life rather than with a condition, a health condition. So,
yes.
Yeah.
So trying to buffer off all these different illnesses that, not just the chronic illnesses, but also with the advent of COVID, we've been shown that we're not immune, to use that word, from, biological, I don't want to use that word, the other word, but, we're not immune from getting challenged by different viruses and bacteria, which I think many young people used to think if they lived with a decent degree of health, they wouldn't, get knocked out by a common cold.
You talk a lot about resilience and stress buffering. Can you tell us a bit about what that is and how we can do it?
I'm a big believer in talking about stress generally, not just in the framework of emotional health, but because stress in and of itself is probably one of the most damaging drivers to health dysfunction. And your stress isn't my stress. So I think it was Gabor Mate that coined the term that stress isn't what happens to us, but it's what happens in us. It's the biochemistry that occurs as a result of an event or a trigger from a previous event. So it's the biochemistry, the nervous system effect in your body. So when we talk about stress resilience, what I like to do is increase this, what I call window of tolerance for people. So your reaction to perceived stressors, so it might be that when your boss came to, tap you on the shoulder wanting more from you, or your mother came for lunch and, you noticed a reaction in your body. So I try to work with people to uncover what their stresses are, and that's conscious and unconscious. So the mother one might be conscious, but your unconscious stress triggers may be as a result from things that you perhaps haven't looked at. Psychological traumas, things that had happened in your past, even as children, things that we've buried deep within us, but also they come into our consciousness when we're triggered by events, and that could be relational, it could be the way you react to different conversations, etc. So by increasing the window of tolerance, you are less reactive, and in the less reaction, you create less cortisol, you create less adrenaline, you create less of these hormones which have damaging inflammatory effects on the body and are linked to cancer, neurodegeneration, all sorts of a host of diseases. So how do we increase the window of tolerance? We become physically fitter. So we know if you have an improved heart rate variability, that is your parasympathetic nervous system is stronger, more robust, the vagal tone in your body is higher, that you will be able to buffer stress better. So physical fitness, that's zone 2 training, that's getting out of breath, that's getting slightly uncomfortable. So I encourage a lot of physical fitness, not just because I'm a former exercise addict, but I know that exercise and intervention is probably the number one longevity intervention you can do for yourself. And there's different forms of exercise, we can come to that. So yes, exercise is one. Hormetic stressors. Everyone here has probably now heard of ice baths and saunas and red light therapy, or doing something that's a little bit outside your comfort zone. Hormesis is this concept of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So a little bit of hormetic stress, something you a little bit uncomfortable, get out of your comfort zone, then you adapt. And in that adaptation, you become a little bit stronger. In that, you're creating an armor so that you can buffer your environmental stress a little bit more. Also, we've got to talk a little bit. I have to nod to nutrition in stress buffering here. The more antioxidants, so the polyphenols in your diet, the bright blueberries, the blueberry powders, the pomegranates, the asparagus, all those bright coloured, interesting foods are all things that improve your body's stress buffering because they have high levels of antioxidants which buffer free radicals. Free radicals are created by stress in the body. We go back to that stress biochemistry. So nutrition is important. Protein is a building block of muscles. You mentioned collagen. Glycine is a calming amino acid. It's one of the strongest amino acids in collagen. So all of these things interact. We interweave. We're a system that you want to become robust. You want to become able to buffer your stress. I have to caveat that by saying it is important to try and feel your emotions, acknowledge your stress, because if you don't, then this whole concept, which is coming up and up now, body keeps the score, if you don't acknowledge your feelings and your emotions, they become ingrained and repressed and stored in the body, and in that creates dysfunction, and your immune system will be the one that pays the price.
Fascinating, thank you. And of course, there are loads of trackers and wearables and gadgets to supposedly help us monitor all of this. Can you kind of unpick that space for us a bit? What are any worth investing in? What do you use yourself?
I was one of the early advisors to Oura before they got bought by an American company. So I love the Oura Ring. I know we have all sorts on the market now, and I've noted that women tend to like Oura Rings and men tend to go for Whoops or something similar, the Whoop band. I like the Whoop and the Oura in that they don't nudge you. I really try and get people away from staring at their Apple Watch or their Garmin on a day-to-day. Constant reminders of notifications that you have to be doing something, but also then telling you that you're stressed with all the things that you have to be doing. Yeah. So I do think there's an inherent stress in being tracked and wearabled up to the max. And some of my patients have 4 wearables. They all do the same thing, but they feel confident yeah. in all of the wearables. So I like the Oura. I do say to people that it's not the sleep tracking that I like the most with Oura, because the studies have actually shown it doesn't correlate. So if people that don't know, the Oura Ring is this ring I'm wearing on my finger. It tracks heart rate. It tracks heart rate variability, which I'll come back to because I've mentioned it already. It also tracks body temperature. So when I had flu earlier this week, my body temperature was off the charts, and it told me I was sick. I'm like, I know I'm sick, but it's nice to have you tell me, because it's a reminder you've got to take it easy. So what I like about these wearables is they are accountability tools, because we are living in a world where we're told to TTFU, essentially. We're told to toughen up. We live in a very competitive environment, very demanding. And if you're laying about in bed, you're not getting stuff done. You're often not earning, you're not supporting, whatever. So I like the fact that they give you objective data to say, hey, you need to take a day off. You need to take a day off from the gym. And the converse is true too. You've got good readiness score. You need to go out there and hit it. Make the most of that inherent resilience that you've built in your body. So heart rate variability is one of the most telling longitudinal, longevity-related markers that I like to track. The higher your heart rate variability, the better the balance, going back to that vagal tone, parasympathetic nervous system, that the more robust. So if you want to be aiming for over 50, essentially MS overnight, and if you've had stimulants, if you've had alcohol, if you've eaten too late, your heart rate variability will be suppressed, and you will see that on the curve when you look at your dashboard. So HRV, get HRV savvy.
Exactly, thank you. You were also telling me about this, the special earphones that you wear, or earplugs, blue light earplugs. Can you tell us about those?
It's funny because I always trying to sort of a little bit of backlash on the biohacking world, because I see people, Brian Johnson wannabes walking around with something up their nose, something around their wrist, something up their bum.
I'm going to live a long time, but I'm going to look very silly doing it.
Yeah, it's true. I think wearables are really useful as a learning tool, and so I give them to patients, and I use them to get insights, and then I'm like, okay, now use your intuition. So I got off track there a second. The blue light headphones.
Yes.
So listen, we've seen very little light. We actually got some today, but we've seen very little blue light. And blue light in the morning is that light you get in the sky, when there's a little cloud cover. And what that does is switch off your overnight melatonin production, which is your sleep hormone, and it brings up your level of cortisol. We all bemoan cortisol, but actually we need a cortisol peak in the morning. And if you don't have any light in the sky, you're not getting enough awakening hormone into your system. So I do have a pair of earphones that send blue light into my ear, which my brain recognizes as a signal, which then alerts us to we've got things to do today. It also, we now know, helps regulate our sleep by getting blue light or light in the morning. Daylight really helps regulate your sleep, but also it's related to appetite, your ghrelin hormones. So this human charger that I wear, no affiliation, in the morning when we're in dull London, I notice it really improves my energy and focus.
Fantastic. And just lastly, because you're such an athlete, what can we do to create longevity in terms of movement and the way we exercise? I'm sure we've all got our sports that we love. We want to keep doing them for as long as possible. Have you got any advice for the longevity in sport or in the or fitness?
Sure. I'm going to caveat that by saying that non-exercise movement is probably the most important thing you can do. I have often been surprised, having hung out with people on various different events and week events and stuff, how little people actually move. And it's either I'm going to the gym or I'm not doing anything. And we know that actually just moving around, walking as opposed to taking the bus or the tube a few stops, walking up the escalators, doing a little bit of mobility exercise if you're at an event like this, doing a couple of squats if people don't mind giving you a strange look. But if we take it down to what we actually know in exercise strategies for longevity, you've got to think of a few things. You've got to think of cardiovascular fitness. That's your heart health. How physically fit is your heart? And to improve cardiovascular fitness, you've got to get a little bit out of breath sometimes, probably 2 to 3 times a week. You've got to be at the pace where you can have a conversation, but you don't want to. That is your zone 2 threshold training. That's maybe it's even going out for a fast walk with your friends and you're a little bit out of breath, but you can have a conversation. So cardiovascular fitness is one. You can do that through swimming, walking, running, cycling, whatever the thing is, but preferably do an exercise that you like. We know that if you're doing an exercise you don't like, you're going to be raising your hormones of stress, which is also, going to have that knock-on effect. Cardiovascular fitness. Second one is strength, muscular robustness. We know that as we talk about organs of longevity, heart being one, the second one is your muscles. We need you to build robust, strong muscles, and you will lose muscle mass as you age. As hormones decline, estrogen declines, testosterone, DHEA, those are anabolic building hormones. As they decline, you will lose muscle mass if you don't try and counteract that. So you do need to do a bit of resistance training. That doesn't necessarily need to be in the gym. It can be strong Pilates, it can be strong yoga, but especially the big muscles of the quads. Leading cause of death in women in the UK and globally actually is fractured neck of femur. That's breaking your hip. The more robust your muscles are, the more buffered, back to that word, you are against breaking your hip, which will end you in hospital and possibly end your life. I can't stress that enough. Obviously, there's more to bone density than just muscle strength. There's nutritional factors, there's light, vitamin D, etc. But that's another one. Third one is posture and flexibility. A lot of the runners, as a former triathlete, I had terrible flexibility. So when I gave up triathlon, my flexibility improved massively. So doing a bit of yoga, flexibility, movement, especially in the morning, getting some flexibility into you, and have your posture assessed. I work very closely with someone called Boniface, who's an osteopath, and I can't tell you how important the posture is to all of your organ functioning. Those are the main ones.
Fascinating, thank you. I'm off to buy those earplugs straight after this. So we've heard a lot about the body, so moving on to Dr. Pam now. So I know you treat the body, but your specialism is the face with this kind of traceless, ageless look. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of taking the long view of facial aesthetics? How does a face age, and what factors do we need to take into account when planning our kind of aesthetics journey?
I think it's important to look at a whole approach 360 because patients come into a clinic just wanting something to erase wrinkles and look younger, fresher. But I always like to spend time in the consultation. I think it's key to understand what they're doing at home in terms of diet, nutrition, skincare, whether they have a busy lifestyle, exercise. So it's kind of making sure that they're not just having a little bit of an injectable, because we could do a great treatment in clinic, but if they're not looking after the skin from inside and outside at home, you're never going to get the wow effect. You're not going to get the best results, right? So I think it's making sure that they understand that they need to, or educate them as well, in terms of nutrition, supplementation, again, coming to wellness, longevity, we need to focus on the well-being of the patient as well.
Yeah. And I know that you have quite a long talk about what kind of nutrition people are getting, because obviously that's going to support the effectiveness of any treatment you do. And, you know, you need to come and visit you less if you are really kind of looking after the longevity of your treatment. So what is key there? What sort of things do you advise patients?
Absolutely. I think, as Sarah was saying, is also making sure you have the right nutrients in terms of vitamins, antioxidants. And people forget. They think, oh no, but I eat very healthy. But they sometimes don't realize that we don't get everything from diet, so we still need to supplement. And when you have a good foundation on the skin, then any treatment we do will deliver the best aesthetic results. So for me, it's important to look at the key ingredients that we'll recommend. Obviously, focus on the skin sometimes, but a lot of patients now also want a little bit of that energy, boost immune system and so on. So it's a whole combination. But in terms of collagen, as you probably know, it's been around for years as what's the best supplement I can take. We focus on glutathione, NAD, because it will help to slow the aging process as well. Not just on the face, but also at cellular level. Magnesium, again, very important, vitamin C and so on. So they can obviously apply it topically with a skincare product, but it will also focus a lot of that with IV therapy.
Yeah, so IV therapies alongside facial aesthetics is kind of what you're known for. Can you talk us through the idea of collagen banking as a kind of prejuvenation or an aging well strategy? What is collagen banking and how do you do it?
Sure. So collagen banking is a term where we combine different therapies to try and store and preserve that collagen. And we can do that by, again, supplements. We can do that by doing treatments, such as microneedling, for example. It's a great treatment to stimulate collagen and elastin. So we can obviously go through different treatment options with patients and see what's the best or the most suitable for them, depending on the skin type as well. But it is the idea of trying to preserve that collagen on the skin and in the organs. But people forget we have different types of collagen as well. There's not just one. Obviously, when it comes to skin, we focus on collagen type 1, type 3, but people forget that there's all sorts of different types of collagen in the body. So from the skin, the joints.
And how would you support those, with IV or with
mainly with supplementation more than
energy
yes.
treatments?
Yeah, so again, in terms of treatments, we can combine sometimes whether it's microneedling, radiofrequency, which has become very popular also over the years as a combination. We use a lot of polynucleotides nowadays, which has become also very trendy. So again, it's all about stimulation that collagen
Biostimulating, so making our own collagen and supporting it with all the nutrients that we can. But you also offer something called ozone therapy, and it's not very common, but tell us a little bit about why it's important for longevity and health generally.
So medical ozone therapy, if you're not familiar with it, we can do it with different methods of administration. So we can administer it intravenously. We can also do intramuscular injections. It can be ear insufflation, vaginal insufflation. So there's different methods, but essentially,
so it's essentially like an IV, is it?
Yes. So we'll do mainly IVs in the clinic, and what we do is we extract blood from the patient, as if you were having a blood test, and we infuse pure ozone into it. So that stimulates the increase of oxygen in the blood, and we reinject it back into the body. Now, ozone has different properties, but the main one is anti-inflammatory.
Yeah.
So again, for certain chronic disease, it's amazing because inflammation, as you know, is a cause of a lot of diseases that we suffer. It's antibacterial, it's antiviral, it's antifungal, so we can focus in a lot of different things that we want to improve. But we can also use it to boost the energy and the immune system, because it's involved also in promoting the NAD and glutathione naturally in the body.
So it's like a general health support and energy boost, and I'm surprised it's not crazy expensive either, you know, compared to some other
compared
therapies.
to other treatments,
So
it's still quite reasonable. And obviously, depending on the patient, we'll recommend a certain number of sessions. And again, if it's just for well-being, wellness, people might come every 2-3 months. But people who sometimes suffer from arthritis, again, osteoporosis, they might come once a week. For a couple of months, and they really feel the benefit because by obviously having the anti-inflammatory effect, we reduce pain. So we give them also better.
All over body, but that really can support what you're doing for the face as well. Well, thank you. That's been absolutely fascinating. I just want to close by asking each of our panelists one question. Well, it's sort of two. One or two words. Sarah, what is the trend to follow and the fad to avoid?
Okay, the fad to
space.
avoid.
Yeah.
I've got two.
Go on then.
One is forcing hot water through plastic coffee capsules with aluminium lids. I am seeing so many people with raised aluminium.
Wow.
You know, we need to avoid toxins. That is such an obvious one. We've got nootropics over there. You've got various alternatives now. So get the aluminium out of your life. Also avoid £5,000 smart ice baths. Really?
Just turn your shower on
Can
cold.
we have a cold shower? Yeah. And what I am enjoying following, I think, is the gut health. Fermented foods, all of that's so important. Gut health is linked to absolutely everything.
It's been here for thousands of years and it's here to stay.
Absolutely.
Fermented foods. Thank you. Dr. Tam.
The fad to avoid, and this might be controversial for some people, in my opinion, is NAD IVs. Because it doesn't make sense to me if you flood your body with a universal energy cofactor that your body has to generate itself, then you're going to downregulate the way your body does that. So I focus, now we've got Nicola who runs Nichido here,
And
on
he's nodding.
NAD. It's a brilliant supplement. On NAD precursors, that is, teach your body to produce NAD better itself. Look at why you might have NAD levels are low. In my own case, you know, COVID, you know, many of us have had COVID repeated times. Any infections, stress, travel, aging generally will reduce your NAD levels. So please don't sign up to NAD drips every 5 minutes.
They take forever and they make you feel sick as well.
They also might accelerate any early cancer, and we know that cancer rates are going through the roof. So that's one I like to caveat. And it also depletes your B vitamins and your methylation. So that's why supplements focus on NAD precursors and more balanced formulas that can support your own body to produce it. Always look at root cause. And the one trend that I really like that I've been doing for many years, but everyone seems to be doing it, including people in the audience, is photobiomodulation, using energy and light to stimulate your cell batteries, your mitochondria, to produce energy better. We are light beings. This whole field of quantum medicine is up and coming, and it's not woo-woo, and we are light beings. Look how different you feel when you're in a bikini on a beach. Your immune system, your nervous system will thank you. There's far more to light than vitamin D.
Brilliant. Thank you. Pam, how about you? One to embrace, one to avoid.
Oh, they've covered Sarah and Tam already quite a few. I'll probably say I'm not into following necessarily trends. I think there is certain therapies and treatments they work. They've been around over the years, so you just need to focus on your health and seeing the right practitioner. That's what I always find very tricky, because sometimes people will go and start buying like crazy. So I think it's important to sometimes learn a little bit more, see a specialist.
Yeah, have a plan for your face. And body.
Absolutely, and understand ingredients and different technologies and devices, and see what's the best one for yourself. And in terms of, again, IV, for NAD, I agree with Tam. as much as I do IV therapy, we don't offer NAD in
Interesting,
clinic.
yeah.
And
And one to
the
embrace?
same with the inject.
And a trend to embrace?
I would probably say in terms of longevity and biohacking, there is loads of new therapies coming in. So I would probably say for me, medical ozone
Yes, of course,
is going to be
It has
a focus this year.
so many applications,
We're
yeah.
working in collaboration with different specialties as well to work with hormone replacement therapy because we have more and more patients now asking for peri and menopausal symptoms.
Brilliant. Thank
so-
you so much. Thank you to all three panelists. Thank you all for listening. And I'd love to give them a round of applause
Thank
for their
you.
wisdom and insights in longevity. Thank you.